Good morning, honourable delegates. We will be starting in a few minutes. My apologies for this, but we are just trying to locate someone who is struggling with the accreditation process. So as soon as we've got that sorted, we will commence. So in the meantime, use the time to network. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Speaker for the South African National Assembly, distinguished delegates, my name is Aya Eza Silva Rosso. I will be your chair for this first session in this morning. So I hope you guys have a very rested night, so we shall start our work for today. As such, let me call Honorable Ndlovu to make us a wrap on the discussions we had yesterday. Thank you.
Thanks, program directors. Thanks, program directors, chairperson and co-chairpersons of the session, speaker, distinguished guests. I also want to make a special greetings to my co-chair, who's been with us since yesterday, Honorable Lekanyani, the co-chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee of Finance Management of Parliament of South Africa, the chairperson of Women Caucus, Mamduja. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. At least I can hear that you slept well. The role that women play in society cannot be understated. However, when it comes to influencing policy and decision-making roles, they are at the back foot and their voices are not heard. Research done by the United Nations shows that women are underrepresented as voters as well as in leading position, whether in elected office, the civil and public service, the private sector or academia. As of 12 September 2025, there are 29 countries where 32 women serve as heads of state and or government. At the current rate, gender equality in the highest position of power will not be reached for another 130 years. Just 19 countries have a woman head of state, and 22 countries as of 1 January 2025. There are only 9 countries in which women hold 50% or more of the positions of cabinet ministry leading policy areas. The 5 most commonly held portfolio of women cabinet ministers are women in gender equality, followed by family and children affairs, social inclusion and development, social protection and social security and culture. This clearly shows that structural barriers such as must be removed. Women's equal participation and leadership in political and public life are essential to achieving the sustainable development goals by 2030. This has to be done as a matter of urgency. It is particularly concerning that even institutions such as the Parliament that are supposed to uphold democratic values, the participation of women is limited. Research shows that in the legislative sector, only 27.2% of parliamentarians in single or lower houses are women, up from 11% in 1995. Only 6 countries have 50% or more women in parliament in single or lower houses. Rwanda, 64%, Cuba, 56%, Nicaragua, 55%, Andorra, 50%, Mexico, 50%, and the United Arab Emirates, 50%. A further 21 countries have reached or surpassed 40%, including 9 countries in Europe, 6 in Latin America and the Caribbean, 5 in Africa, and 1 in Asian Pacific. Globally, there are 21 states in which women account for less than 10% of parliamentarians in single or lower houses, including 3 lower chambers with no women at all. I want to repeat this. Globally, there are 21 states in which women account for less than 10% of parliamentarians in single or lower houses, including 3 lower chambers with no women at all. At the current rates of progress, gender parity in national legislative bodies will not be achieved before 2063. South Africa is not insulated against this culture and social barriers, so we all have a responsibility to address these shortfalls and ensure women's participation in all levels of government as well as the legislative sector. Time for talking is over. Honorable Speaker, time for talking is over. We must act now. Honorable Laureate emphasized the need to champion gender-responsive challenges, especially for women in rural areas, and to ensure that women are not stakeholders, but are active participants by addressing underrepresentation of women in leadership, as well as ensure that gender equality is at the center of government programs. Legislation is a critical building block in addressing gender issues. Honorable members, Honorable Staneka, Vice President of Inter-Parliamentary Union, stated that an inclusive approach to women issues is critical. Gender parity must become the norm and not an exception, and this has been achieved and has become a reality in some parliaments due to political will and legislation. So if there's no political will, it means nothing will happen. Progress can be built by gender responsive laws, and Parliament have committed to address these issues. Global solidarity, equality, and sustainability can only be achieved if there is gender equality. Mamdujwa, the chairperson of Women Caucus in Parliament of South Africa, asserted that equality is a non-negotiable goal and it must be linked to sustainability. The challenges, risks, and benefits associated with artificial intelligence must be explored. The AI can be a powerful tool, yet we must be clear about the risk that it brings. Certain sectors are more sustainable to AI and can widen the economic gap, especially for women and people with disability who can be disadvantaged if they are in sectors affected negatively by the change. Sustainability is a legacy. Honorable Mananis declared that climate change is a human rights challenge and impact key sectors, such as health, infrastructure, etc., with women bearing the brunt of a disaster. There is a need to commit a concrete solution and partnership in this regard. Honorable van der Merwe called all the acts to end poverty and asserted the lack of access to basic education and economic opportunities contribute to this. Parliamentarians must craft laws to protect women from gender inequality and women's representation on all forms and must be expanded. We must all champion education for all as it is key to empowering women and girls and to deal with GBV. The session on climate change led by Advocate Maluleke indicated that women are left behind in important matters such as climate change. Honorable members, Advocate Maluleke discussed the notion of gender responsibility gender responsive budgeting is important and what the executive is doing to incorporate and mainstream this in the program of government, both in planning as well as execution. The approach includes youth and people with disability. She outlines the importance of gender responsive budgeting in auditing as well as monitoring and evaluation work done by the Department of Planning and Monitoring. This means that Parliament is in its entirety must ensure that oversight conducts the implementation of gender-based budgeting by all government departments. She also outlined the impact of climate change on women as the most vulnerable group. The low representation of women in platforms such as climate change is a concern, as women must be part and parcel of climate change initiatives. Dr. Yazini April explored the issue of JET, just energy transition, to hydrogen in order to reduce carbonization and the challenges faced by women in securing energy finance. South Africa is the 7th producer of coal globally, behind China in first place and India as second. Electricity is an important contributor to South African GDP as well as employment. The changes to JET has negative effects on the coal mining as well as the value chain, which include SMMEs. The role of women in energy is negligible, 32% globally, and must be expanded globally. The global financial architecture does not favor SMMEs and the informal economy. It is inclusionary, where we must strive to implement JET in a manner or approach that will not harm domestic industries. The participation of women in energy must be encouraged, as well as encouraging an approach that removes obstacles for meaningful participation of women. All these initiatives discussed in yesterday's session must be implemented expeditiously. Honorable members and colleagues and the program directors, the time for talk is over. It's time to act now. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Honorable Lovu, for this wrap-up of our first day of discussions. Delegates, let us remember you that you have a form where you can fill up if you feel like participating in this section. Right after, we will have my co-chair, Honorable Kanili, who will introduce our presenter for this section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Trosser. I'd like to take this opportunity and acknowledge Honorable Speaker, Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Chair Dunjwa of the Multi-Party Women Caucus. I see in our midst we also have the members of the Steering Committee of the Multi-Party Women Caucus, Honorable Chair Van der Merwe of the Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, and distinguished guests. It gives me a great honor to chair today's session on gender-sensitive programs for inclusive growth. I'm going to introduce Professor Nania Bolamula. She's a Divisional Executive, Developmental Capable and Ethical State Research Division, Human Sciences Research Council, in abbreviation is HSRC, and Chair and Head of Delegation of Women 20, South Africa. He holds a Doctor of Laws, LLD, from the University of Pretoria and specializes in participatory democracy and social justice, as well as gender equality and the fulfillment of socio-economic rights. Bolamula was formerly a professor at Nelson Mandela University, then known as Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. Before she joined the Africa Institute of South Africa in 2011, Before she joined the Africa Institute of South Africa in 2011 as a research director. In 2012, she became the Deputy Executive Director of the HSRC's former Democracy, Governance and Service Delivery Research Division. Bola Mula was an adjunct professor of law in University of Fort Hare in the year 2015 to 2020 and is currently a research associate with the Center for Gender and Africa Studies in the University of Free State. May we put our hands together and welcome her.
Thank you, Honourable Chairs, and also for the kind introduction. Greetings to the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker and Honourable Members, all protocol observed. So the mandate that I was given for today was to look at inclusive growth and gender equality and the relationship between inclusive growth, sustainable development, and gender equality. So inclusive growth is a well-known concept that looks at the fact that everyone must benefit from growth. So that's the word inclusive. So no one must be included from growth. And many times, women who are the face of poverty, not only in Africa, but across the world, are excluded from the benefits of growth. So that's why we talk about inclusive growth. However, inclusive growth is not always sustainable. And that's why we have the issue of sustainability that comes into the picture to make sure that we have a future to leave our children and our grandchildren and an earth that contributes to our health and well-being. And so we could possibly call it inclusive and sustainable growth, or inclusive and sustainable development. In fact, the Sustainable Development Goals says that we should leave no one behind. So that's basically saying that it's inclusive, and women should not be left behind. And the sad reality here is that women are often left behind. So that's why gender equality lens and focus becomes very important, because if we talk about inclusivity, we're referring to women, we're referring to girls, and the most vulnerable and marginalized in society. So when we exercise our leadership responsibly, we need to understand this particular context. The structural inequalities that we live with in our societies are well known, I am sure, to G20 parliamentarians. And inequalities and inequities stand in the way of peace, prosperity, and justice in any society and across the world. So you, as lawmakers, fiscal architects, and stewards of development, inclusive and sustainable, are able to shape national priorities and reforms, as well as ensure that we have, as with South Africa, something like a multi-party gender caucus or a gender commission within the parliamentary context. So we need to look at GDP differently, not only in terms of economics, but also in terms of well-being, dignity, the distribution of resources, and the durability for meaningful economic process. So we could actually refer to sustainability alongside durability. So dignity, distribution, and durability, not only numbers. However, numbers are important. The only way that we can know where to intervene in terms of policy is indeed looking at data. And the issue for Women 20 that we've come across is that there is not sufficient gender and sex disaggregated data across countries. In all countries, there is a challenge with finding the right data to make the right decisions. And so we need to find a way of improving access to data and quality data that tells us what we need to know. Also, when we conduct social impact assessments of legislation, we very seldom look at the specific needs of women. So that is also something, a gender impact assessments can be included into what we are currently doing with social impact assessments. I was asked to focus specifically on rural women. So why? Because rural women tend to be the excluded. Less than 15% of rural women hold land rights across the G20, according to UN Women, highlighting significant gender inequality in land tenure. This is a problem that must be addressed urgently. The economic disparities are large. Rural women face gender pay gaps exceeding 20% and limited access to agricultural services and digital tools. And of course, digital tools are very necessary for agricultural purposes, for instance. There is an undervaluation of care, both in the urban and rural contexts, but rural women actually carry the burden of care far more heavily than anyone else. And it is critical that we start to recognize the value of care and even calculate it in economic terms to see how women are actually participating in the economy whilst remaining invisible. So the W20 agenda highlights the cross-cutting issues that we are bringing to the attention of the leaders is for gender-responsive budgeting or gender-sensitive budgeting. So to focus on budgeting laws with annual reporting, monitoring and evaluation to ensure that the funds that are available are used for the purposes that they're supposed to be used. We also recognize time-bound equity targets, such as for procurement, so setting legally binding equity targets to promote measurable and timely progress in gender equality, including amongst rural women. And of course, sectoral frameworks and accountability. We need to be held accountable for the progress or lack of progress that is being made when it comes to gender equality within the context of inclusive growth and sustainability. So we need to emphasize entrepreneurship, STEM, climate, land rights for coordinated policy action. So what are the key inputs for change? The first one is financing, gender analysis, and accountability. These are critical inputs to make sure that our gender initiatives are effective and impactful. If we don't finance policies, if we don't finance laws, nothing will happen. It will just be talk. That is the hard reality of it. The strategic actions include legislative alignment, budget reform, and capacity building to make sure that people understand what gender mainstreaming actually is. And then desired outcomes, what we want. We want inclusive and sustainable development, structural equity, and a lasting legacy for P20, for W20, for G20 under the South African presidency. And we do this taking into account the value of Ubuntu. I am because you are. And this allows us to understand that our lives are intricately woven with others, and therefore no one should be left behind. Because if you are left behind, I may be left behind. We looked specifically at climate justice, the environment, and food security as a theme for W20. And I just want to give you an idea of some of the recommendations we are also putting forward to the leaders. First of all, women's role in climate resilience. Women are not only victims, they are also very capable of building climate resilience, including through traditional knowledge systems, and ensuring that women are part of the solution-making processes. So when it comes to disaster risk management and disaster risk prevention and reduction, women should play a leadership role. We should have goals for female participation. One of the targets that we suggest is 50% female participation in energy value chains, by 2030 and access to carbon markets and land rights. This is an ideal, an aspiration, but the problem is that less than 22% of women are in decision-making roles in the energy sector. Policy and legislative actions, that's your job, to legislate for female participation, to reform climate finance, a very important one, and to ensure land tenure for women. Promoting gender-responsive solutions, nature-based and technological solutions should be promoted to support a gender-responsive green, blue, and circular economy. So not only traditional, but also technological solutions. So what can we ask of you as parliamentarians within the roles that you have in our society? Strong legislative oversight and budgets, making sure that budgets are gender sensitive and gender mainstreamed, and making sure that resource allocation is fair and distributive, especially when it comes to women. During the constituency engagements that you have as parliamentarians, make sure that the vulnerable and marginalized are well represented. And also, in terms of your public participation processes, make sure that the vulnerable and the marginalized are well represented. One of the ways of doing this, really, is through data-driven decision-making. We are the vulnerable. How do we track gender outcomes? How do we make decisions that have input from women themselves, the voices of women and girls, but also driven by data that is gender sensitive as well as sex disaggregated? And of course, what you're doing today here is inter-parliamentary collaboration to work together, to learn from one another, and to foster an inclusive process of decision-making. And that is why it's so wonderful to be in a room that's predominantly occupied by women parliamentarians. So the closing call to action is empower women, and particularly rural women. Empowering rural women will foster national prosperity and prosperity across the G20. So it's not only a social issue, it is an economic issue. If women are brought into the economy, we will prosper. So everybody needs to understand that that is truly inclusive, and that we will truly grow in an inclusive and sustainable manner if we bring women with us. Secondly, gender equality contributes towards not only prosperity, but by inclusion, it deepens democracy. And it assists us with knowing how to govern, and governing in terms of the real lived needs and experiences of the marginalized and the vulnerable. So as parliamentarians, we urge you to propose inclusive bills, look at the wording of your legislation, hold inclusive public hearings, and report on gender equality progress annually. Some of the parliaments do this, others do not. But we would like to see you inspiring transformative change for the sake of women, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. I thank you in the spirit of Ubuntu.
Thank you, Professor Bollenmuller, for this brief but profound insight on gender-sensitive, inclusive growth. Dear honorables and delegates, please, the floor is yours. Just hold up the paper if you want to take the stage. There is an inscription Okay. Thank you. I already have, and I recognize Australia, European Union, Italy, Mozambique, Namibia, Madam Deputy Speaker, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, and United Kingdom. If I fail with someone, please. I believe not. Let's give the floor to Australia.
Good morning, women delegates, and thank you to the speakers that we've heard so far this morning talking about the importance of gender. And what I wanted to talk about and to showcase to you is what's happening with the Australian government currently. So my government has just entered its second term, and we have created history this term by being a caucus that is 56% women, and we have a ministry that is 52% women. And the point that was made by one of the speakers, where women tend to be clustered across human services and all of those soft areas, we've broken through that with our ministers as well. We have a foreign minister, an agriculture minister, a finance minister, an emergency services minister, international development, resources, employment and workplace relations, and an Attorney General, just to name a few portfolios who are all held by women. We have also introduced gender-sensitive budgeting. This is our second time, as we introduced it in the first term of our government, to look at gender-sensitive budgeting. So every single budget item that's put forward has to have a gender lens put across it, and the positive or negative impacts on women must be identified. The other thing that we've done is not just to focus on what the government is doing, is that we've put in place laws that require employers with over 100 employees to report to the Workplace Gender Authority, and they have to report across 6 areas of gender relating to pay, to position, to advancement. There's a whole range of criteria, and if they don't meet that criteria, then they are held accountable to the legislation that was in place. But this hasn't happened by chance. This has been a struggle by women, particularly women in the Labor Party, but women across Australia. So in 1994, the Labor Party, which is the current government in Australia and I'm a member of, introduced quotas. And of course, everyone thought, or men thought, the sky would fall in. And there was a lot of resistance to introducing quotas, but of course, the sky hasn't fallen in. And we now see a much bigger parliament, a much more inclusive parliament, and we're at 56%. And it's not by accident, it is because we introduced quotas in 1994, so it's been a slow progress. Apart from men telling us that the sky would fall in and the world would never be the same again, we used to get called quota girls, which is very demeaning. Our foreign minister, Minister Penny Wong, who some of you will know in this forum, who's extremely accomplished, has been called a quota girl, as have I. But perhaps we wear that badge proudly. The other struggles we've had when we introduced the workplace equality, the WGEA legislation, again, employers thought the world would fall in and the sky would fall in. So none of this has come easily. It comes with a struggle. One of the important things we introduced last year was that many employers across the world use contractors, private contractors, standing against their directly paid workforce, and we know that often there's a pay differential there of at least 20 to 30% less when a contractor comes in, and of course many women are caught in that trap of contractors. So we introduced legislation called Same Job, Same Pay pretty simple. So if you are working alongside a contractor in your workplace against a directly employed employee, they will now earn the same money. And that has just really created, it's made a very big difference in people's pays and their workforce. It's been very positive. But again, we had an onslaught from employers that the sky would fall in and that our inflation would go up and all sorts of things they painted, and none of that's actually happened. And a really good illustration is our national carrier Qantas that had a directly employed workforce, but it also had contractors right across the world. So if you worked in the UK for Qantas, you earned less than your counterparts working in Australia. So that has now changed. So everyone working for Qantas, whether they're directly employed or they are working for a contractor, earns the same pay. And that's just, it's given people... Thank you. Because obviously politicians fly a lot, and I meet flight attendants who tell me that this legislation has changed their lives for the better to get that sort of fairness in their workplace. So yes, we do have to plan for gender equality. We do have to look at gender sensitive policies and frameworks, but I can say that having 56% of our caucus as women has changed our party for the better. There's no doubt about that, that we are making better decisions on behalf of the citizens of Australia because we have women in the cabinet and we have women in the Labor caucus who know what matters. And we know that having women as part of your, as part of politics improves not only women's lives, but it improves the lives of everyone. And so I'm very proud to stand here and tell you just some of the differences that we are making, some of the positive impacts that we are making in the Australian Parliament for women, not only in the Parliament but across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. We have now the Deputy Speaker for the House of Lords, the United Kingdom.
Madam Speakers, Madam Deputy Speakers, distinguished colleagues and friends, before you get confused, I'm not Baroness Bull, the Speaker of the House of Lords. She's my colleague who's sitting there. She'll be speaking shortly. I am Nusrat Ghani, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, and it's an absolute privilege to be a part of this discussion this morning because, as our previous speakers have said, we are not just a part of a global movement, but we're a part of a global movement of parliamentarians, and we do indeed have the power to make the change that we so desperately desire. As was reflected by the previous speaker, I just want to once again remind you that in the UK, we have 35% members of parliament are indeed female. We don't have a quota system in the UK. You get elected in your constituency, and then eventually you may have the luxury of becoming a minister. So the reality is it's not that there aren't enough of us women with the right skill and the ability to get ahead. It's the fact that these opportunities are often denied to us because it's men in power who make the decisions, who can stand as an MP or fundamentally become a minister. And as mentioned by the fantastic speaker earlier, the world does not fall in when women hold leadership positions. Indeed, we can often raise people up with us. So a few facts there, but I really want to touch on the role of women and making sure that they're part of the decision-making process when it comes to managing the economy. And as mentioned by the fantastic professor who's got the most beautiful name, Professor Narnia, I mean, it doesn't get better than that, does it? But we do have complete data, and we also have comprehensive data, which has enabled us to take the policy, strategic decisions that we have taken to support women, and we are more than happy, the UK delegation, to share that work that we are doing to help anybody else around the world. So, we know that the simple truth is that when women are empowered to make economic decisions, societies just thrive. And yet in too many places, including my own country, women remain underrepresented in the rooms where economic futures are shaped. In the UK, women now hold 43% of board positions in FTSE 350 companies and 42.8% of FTSE 100 directorships. Those are the facts that we have. But only 13 women serve as CEOs, that's just 13 across those companies, and just 2 pence of every £1 in venture capital funding goes to female-funded businesses. So we still have issues about access to finance. So this is not a gender gap, not just a gender gap, but it's also a growth gap as well. And that's the data that we are collecting in the UK to show how much more the economy can grow when women are functioning as equal to men. Recent analysis shows that a 5% increase in female employment could boost the UK economy by £125 billion annually. And Professor Nania, I would argue that data must exist across every other territory as well. So in the UK, we have calculated that 5% increase in female employment would boost the UK economy by £125 billion annually. And since 2000, women's economic inclusion has accounted for 40% of the UK economic growth. And these are not abstract numbers, they are a call to action. So what is the UK doing to respond? First, we've launched the Invest in Women Task Force, a government-backed initiative that has already mobilised £255 million in funding for women-led businesses, because we know that access to finance is a major issue. It aims to make the UK the best place in the world to be a female founder. The government has committed £500 million to support underrepresented entrepreneurs. We want to make sure we're reaching out the most marginalised women in our society, especially women who are from ethnic minorities, those women who have disabilities, and that project and that work is being done through the British Business Bank. This includes backing diverse fund managers and microfunds to ensure women have access to capital and influence in venture finance. Now, we know that women have dual positions, not only becoming carers for their parents, but also as mums managing childcare. So we have expanded free childcare and a wraparound care, tackling the gender pay gap and introducing better protections for pregnant women and those returning from maternity leave. We know that women are exceptionally vulnerable in returning to safe and secure employment once they've taken maternity leave. These policies are designed to remove the barriers that disproportionately affect women's participation in the workforce. Fourth, as was mentioned earlier by Professor Nania, we are embedding gender-responsive budgeting into our spending reviews. So we are looking at managing a macro and micro economy and not using the issue around gender as a side issue, but it's mainstreamed in our overall budgeting strategy. Organisations like the Women's Budget Group have called for reforms to tax and public spending that recognise the long-term benefits of investing in women, especially in health, social care and housing. And in the UK, our Chancellor of the Exchequer, our Chief Financial Minister is indeed female, and my privilege as being the Principal Deputy Speaker, I'm also the Chairman of Ways and Means, so I oversee the budget. So you've got a female Speaker managing the budget and a female Chancellor delivering the budget as well in the United Kingdom. Fifth, we are supporting women in trade and digital business through programmes like the UK Export Academy, digital exporting programmes and the Global Entrepreneurs Programme, ensuring women have the tools to scale globally. Previously, I was the Business and Trade Minister, and what we've also done is introduced women's chapters in every trade deals that we undertake, which also focuses on how we can ensure that within every trade deal that we secure, we're looking at female entrepreneurs and female businesses who can thrive within those trade deals as well. So let me be clear, empowering women in economic decision-making is not a side issue. It is a strategic imperative. It's about unlocking innovation, driving productivity and building resilience in our economies. Inter-parliamentary dialogue shows that women's entrepreneurship is being championed in every region of the world, yet the barriers are strikingly familiar: access to credit, venture capital and global markets. At recent IPU assemblies, parliamentarians have called for targeted policies to close the investment gap, noting the untapped growth potential when women scale businesses across borders. Such perspectives are also welcomed back in Westminster, reinforcing that the UK's domestic reforms are part of a wider global movement to value women's innovation and economic leadership. Now, as female MPs, we have a unique responsibility, not just to advocate, but to legislate, to ensure that economic systems reflect the diversity of our societies and the brilliance of our women. Because we know, we have the evidence, we have the data, Professor, that women shape economies. We don't just change outcomes, we change the futures. We have a lot to learn in the UK, but we're also very happy, the UK delegation, to show the policies, to showcase the policies that we have to try and help any other country going forward as well. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Baroness Bull, the floor is yours. Are you speaking on this one? Is later okay? Wonderful.
Okay. Then we shall have Mozambique.
Bom dia a todos. Muito obrigada, Senhora Presidente da Mesa. Excelências, distinguidos convidados.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, throughout the last decades, our countries have been making considerable progress in recognition of the right of men and in promotion of gender equality. For instance, in Mozambique, at the level of the sovereign structures, women are well represented. They are in the leadership of 4 of the 5 structures. The parliament is led by a woman. Even in the Constitutional Council. Therefore, in the 5 main organs, 4 are led by women. Mozambique is also having a very powerful and strong intervention by women, especially at the level of governors and district leaders. In spite of this progress, women are still faced with many obstacles, most of which deriving from cultural and social barriers, which limit their voice and their visibility in the decision-making process and conflict resolution. In this context, when you're talking about gender-sensitive programs, we are referring to initiatives that recognize the different needs of women and men, whereby we can have specific mechanisms in order to reduce these historic inequalities that always have existed. It's not about privilege, but rather about justice and balance. The political capacity building programs for women and the mentorship mechanism, as well as the solidarity network among the women leaders, especially involving also women from rural areas. These are concrete examples in terms of how we can transform the current discriminatory landscape, leading to a spectrum of hope for women. I'd also like to highlight that once we adopt these gender-sensitive programs, we're not only talking about the issue of human rights, but rather a question of strategic development process. The Sustainable Development Goals require the right use of talent, creativity, and leadership from the side of women. The National Assembly of Mozambique would like to reiterate the commitment in terms of continuing to adopt legislations and monitoring policies and promoting initiatives aimed at strengthening the presence and influence of women in the public lives and political lives in the country. I would like to conclude by saying that when we empower women, we are getting rid of barriers in terms of their political participation and strengthening not only democracy, but also the hope of a more just and inclusive and sustainable future for all. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank Thank you, Mozambique. We now have Italy.
Grazie Presidente, cari colleghi, sono molto felice di essere qui oggi a questa seconda conferenza delle donne parlamentari del P20. È un appuntamento molto importante perché porta nel G20 una prospettiva di genere che non è un dettaglio ma è uno strumento indispensabile.
This is a fundamental tool to cope with major global challenges. The South African presidency invites us to think over the role of women in building solidarity, equality and sustainability, and in particular on how to develop programs which are focused on gender equality, turning into an inclusive growth and sustainable development. Italy has been deeply committed in these issues. We have adopted laws to turn gender equality a leverage for development. Let me give you an example. The first one is the gender budget. It was introduced as a test in 2016, and it is a tool that shows how public resources are spent, and it highlights differences between women and men and corrects imbalances. And this is a way to rebalance resources equally, making sure that no one is left behind. In 2023, the Ministry of Finance sent the Parliament an annex to the budget law. It actually focuses on gender equality expenditures and environmental expenditures. So more transparency and more equality. Gender equality is part and parcel of our health system. We allocated resources to diseases which hit women more heavily. Let me think about CV diseases, cardiovascular diseases, which are on the rise after menopause, osteoporosis, some forms of cancer, or neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, depression, multiple sclerosis, which affects women more than men. And another key aspect is education. Italy heavily invests on girls so that women choose STEM areas of study. Women are underrepresented in these sectors, but they represent the throbbing heart of the economy of the future. But Italy is looking beyond its borders. We are working at an international level. We're working with Africa by means of the Mattei Plan, which was actually triggered in 2024. The Mattei Plan is not only an economic plan, it is an equal opportunity-based project because there's no development without the involvement of women. Women must be valued in their competences. Women must be given equal opportunities of training and work. That's why many projects are aimed at women. For instance, the green transition, it's considered as fair only if women are the driving force of all its phases, starting from planning to outcome assessment. Let me give an example. The Excellence Center that we actually triggered with the Mohammed VI University and the foundation level. The maiden course saw 47 managers, including 5 women, which were selected among 500 applicants. This was a key message. No energy transition without women. The same approach was actually followed in Kenya with manager training courses, which were set up with local universities, and women's attendance has been heavily promoted. The Mattei Plan aims at health as well, because we know that health systems cannot be fragile. Otherwise, women have to bear the heavier brunt as mothers, sisters, and daughters. That's why we promoted a feasibility study. We promoted it in neonatal and pediatric hospital in Côte d'Ivoire. These initiatives have a clear impact on women's lives and their communities. Dear colleagues, these examples are very clear, and they tell us something. Gender equality is not a secondary issue. It is the throbbing heart of every development policy. If societies leave women behind, they become more fragile. Valuing society are more just, more prosperous, more free. There's no progress without women. The world will never be sustainable if it won't be based on, unless it's based on gender equality. Let me close with the words of an Italian scientist, Rita Levi-Montalcini, Nobel laureate. Women who changed the world never needed to demonstrate anything unless only their intelligence. We need to make sure that the intelligence of women keep changing the world.
We call now United Arab Emirates.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. لعلنا نتفق جميعا على أن أي برنامج تنموي يغفل دور المرأة إنما يغفل نصف الحلول الممكنة. فقد أثبتت التجارب أن التنمية الحقيقية لا
Experience has proven that sustainable
لا يتجزأ من معادلة النمو والاستقرار.
Honorable Speaker, just a minute. I think we do not have translation. I wonder. And the English translation feeds in the other languages, so the English translation is very important. Could you please confirm?
Yes, yes, we can hear the interpreters.
Can we go now?
There may have been an overlap between the interpreters, but the technical hitch has been sorted out now.
All right. Thank you, Honorable. Please.
The interpreters unfortunately cannot hear the sound. As I was saying before, experience has shown that you can't achieve sustainable development if you exclude women. When women's skills are part of the development equation, then we will achieve our goals. The parliaments have a dual responsibility, not just legislating, but setting up a political culture to strengthen the skills of women, making sure there's gender equality at all levels, whether it comes to oversight, partnerships, and in all other areas. Only these measures will ensure that we achieve sustainable development. We need to make sure that gender equality is part of our culture. to make sure that women are at the heart of all development strategies. I just want to tell you about the United Arab Emirates. Very early on, we made sure that strengthening women's skills was an integral part of its development strategy, and therefore women is an active partner in developing all laws, so there's parity, equity, salaries that have enabled the United Arab Emirates to be in 8th place when it comes to gender parity, according to the statistics. Now let's look at what's happening on the ground. Well, women are the head of 1 in 10 countries. Over 23,000 businesswomen that are CEOs of big companies. So we see how important their role is. As of 2015, a Gender Equality Council was set up in our country, and this enabled us to increase women's participation by 30%. Distinguished guests, our experience has shown us that more social peace, more development, more social harmony, and enables us to change mentalities and culture and mindsets. And this will enable us to achieve sustainable development, because that's what we are all aiming for. Thank you very much for your attention.
We call now Turkey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Parliament of South Africa for their warm hospitality and for hosting this excellent organization. And as I stated yesterday, our head of delegation, Madam Asuman Erdoğan, had to cancel her trip at the last minute. It was not possible for another female MP to replace her due to known procedures, as you know. That's why I am acting as her representative here. I offer my respect to all of you. Distinguished participants, today in the 10th year of the Sustainable Development Goals, I am pleased to gather to discuss this very important issue. To realize these goals and achieve truly inclusive economic growth, all stakeholders in society must act together without distinction between women and men. The inequalities women face limit their full participation in economic restrict the growth potential of global economies. We, as Turkey, wholeheartedly believe in the potential and power of women. Furthermore, as we continue our efforts to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, we are fully aware that equality between men and women is central to this agenda, and that women parliamentarians play a vital role in advancing this issue. With this perspective, we have enacted regulation in our Constitution and fundamental laws that ensure equality between women and men and adopt and discrimination. Building on these reforms, we have adopted a new strategy document and action plan for women's empowerment that aims to strengthen women's participation and ensure they fully benefit from rights, opportunities, and resources. In addition to this, we are expanding our projects and initiatives to ensure the full integration of women into many different areas of economic life. We have signed the cooperation protocol on women's employment of the century business positive program to raise public awareness of the importance of increasing women's employment and ensuring their active participation in workforce. In addition to plan to launch the second phase of the budgeting and planning responsive to equality between women and men in Turkey project, Turkey is one of the 23 OECD member countries implementing this budget model. Esteemed participants, building an inclusive and sustainable future is our shared responsibility. We can build together this future by implementing policies that ensure equality between men and women in our own countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call now Namibia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. May I please stand on the protocol already established? Developing gender-sensitive programs isn't just about policy frameworks. It is about transforming lived realities. Namibia's experience offers both inspiration and hard-won lessons for our shared journey towards inclusive growth and sustainable development. Foundation, the constitutional commitment. Since our independence, we've anchored gender equality in our constitution through Articles 10 and 23, which prohibit discrimination and mandates affirmative action. But constitutional promises require parliamentary vigilance. The ruling party's zebra system, which alternates men and women on its party list, delivered 50% women's representation in our 7th parliament, which is the previous one before the current one. Today, that figure has declined to 38.5%. This regression, which is on account of the ruling party's reduced seats in parliament, reminds us that progress isn't automatic. It demands constant parliamentary stewardship, because that was a voluntary arrangement of the ruling party. It's not a requirement of the law. We've learned that gender-sensitive legislation requires more than good intentions. It demands systematic gender impact assessments for every new law we consider. gender-responsive budgeting. The IMF confirms that gender inequality costs economies dearly, while the European Institute for Gender Equality demonstrates that tackling these inequalities positively impacts GDP, employment, and productivity. In Namibia, we have established gender-responsive budgeting guidelines through a 2014 cabinet decision. It remains a challenge, however, to achieve practical implementation of these guidelines by all stakeholders during formulation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of development interventions, with only 1.5% of our budget confirmed to constitute a gender-specific expenditure, while over 95% remains in mainstream allocations that do not specify gender impact. We must push beyond ad hoc approaches. Our experience shows that when the Ministry of Gender Equality allocates 50% of income-generating grants to women, and when Health and Social Services specifically budgets for maternal health and contraceptives, real change happens. But sporadic success isn't systematic transformation. Our Parliament must therefore mandate gender budget statements for all ministries, especially education, health, mining, and agriculture. Institutionalize gender-sensitive budgeting across all government agencies. Audit past budgets to ensure allocations actually reach women in rural areas and in informal settlements, in indigenous communities like our San communities, and young women, noting the high rate of teenage pregnancies that we experience across many of our societies. We must capacitate parliaments in order to strengthen its oversight by demanding mid-term implementation progress reports on budget performance through a gender lens. Our parliament in Namibia has introduced training for gender-sensitive budgeting for MPs, which is done in collaboration with development partners. Inclusive policy and legal frameworks. Honorable speakers, our national policy on gender equality covering 2021 to 2031 prioritizes gender equality and advocates for women and children. There is, however, a need to strengthen its implementation, and we can learn from experiences of other countries in this regard. We have heard about South Africa having a law in this regard and a commission that actually follow up with implementers to establish compliance with the provisions of the law. I think we can learn more from the experience of South Africa. Women's health and education. A maternal mortality rate reduction of 75% between 2013 and 2020 demonstrate what focused parliamentary attention achieves. Yet 4,814 gender-based violence cases recorded by our police in 2023 to 2024 financial year in a population of only 3 million remind us that safety remains elusive for too many women in our country, with nearly 35% of women subjected to intimate partner violence and or sexual violence, according to the WHO report of 2024. Furthermore, rural women remain the majority of victims of gender-based violence. However, the majority do not disclose this due to stereotype and patriarchy system in our society. The National Assembly of Namibia has received and dealt with various motions on women's health and issues of gender-based violence. Furthermore, our parliamentarians have been trained on sexual and reproductive health and rights, which was done in conjunction with development partners. As a result of promoting and protecting the right of girls and eliminating discrimination in education, Namibia has seen increased enrollment and completion rate of girls and boys at all levels of education, from primary to secondary. Limited access to sanitary products, however, by some students hinder their consistent attendance of school and therefore their school progress. Our parliamentary networks must facilitate knowledge exchange on important matters such as these. Engagement with civil society. Our National Assembly has established long-standing relationships with civil society organizations, as they are often invited by our standing committees to make presentations on important issues affecting grassroots communities and support capacity building efforts for members of parliament in thematic areas such as health, education, gender, and climate change. We are currently establishing comprehensive guidelines for parliamentary engagement with community-based organizations and civil society organizations. We are also deepening our cooperation with these organizations by leveraging their vast networks and funds mobilization capacity for more sustainable and inclusive impact. Furthermore, we note that some countries, I have already referred to this. In conclusion, our role as Parliament isn't just to represent women or women speakers and MPs. It is to ensure that our parliaments become engines of gender-responsive governance. Today's discussions on gender-sensitive budgeting, inclusive policy frameworks, women's health and education, and civil society engagement aren't separate agenda items. They are interconnected pillars supporting the sustainable development we all seek. Let's all leave here committed to 3 actions. First, implementing mandatory gender impact assessments for all legislations in our respective parliaments. Second, establishing systematic gender-responsive budgeting with measurable outcomes and regular parliamentary oversight. And third, creating proactive, structured partnership with women's civil society organizations that move beyond consultation to genuine collaborations. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We have now the Vice President for the European Union Parliament.
Your Excellencies, honorable colleagues, fellow women parliamentarians. First and foremost, thank you very much for the warm welcome I got here yesterday when I arrived to this very, very beautiful country. And also thank you for giving me a chance to speak on behalf of the European Parliament and our President, Roberta Metsola. I think the topic we're discussing today is very close to all of our hearts, but it is also a topic that is essential to our common future. You know, the UN has 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal number 5 is achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. The list may not be a ranking, but let us be quite clear. We will not eradicate poverty. We will not end hunger. We will not have good health and well-being. And we will not achieve quality education unless we put women and girls at the very center of our effort and the very center of the decision-making process. The numbers speak for themselves. The United Nations estimate that gender inequality cost the global economy $10 trillion annually. At the same time, UN also estimates that eradicating extreme poverty would cost about $400 billion per year. So in other words, the price of inequality is 25 times higher than the cost of ending extreme poverty. It's hard to argue with such figures. So how do we move from words to actions? In Europe, we have learned that we will not solve such a large problem only through projects for women and girls. They are important, but they are not enough. Instead, we are working to mainstream gender equality into all our programs. So let us remind ourselves that we as legislators have the power to support these goals. We need to make sure that every rand, euro, dollar, and rupee invested today contributes to equality tomorrow. When we make that choice, we are not only addressing injustice, we are investing in a more prosperous and resilient and more sustainable future for all. If we manage this, the funds we put into these programs really will become investments because they will yield benefits. In the European Parliament, we have constantly argued for gender equality to be a very important part of EU rules and activities. And that's why I'm proud also to tell you that we have made sure that we have a lot of women in the top posts. We have a female president for the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. We have a female president for the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, and we also have a female leader, the High Representative, which is a kind of a foreign minister, Kaja Kallas. So we have tried to put females in leaderships. And I think that's very important to have role models. Today, 85% of EU's development assistance must have a gender equality as an objective. And I think it really matters. And we are proud of this milestone. I'm arguing for this approach because I am a practical person, but it's also because it's the effective thing to do. However, women's rights are under assault across the globe. The progress we have made on gender equality in the last decades seems to erode some places. We need to reverse this trend because it slows our progress and results in worse political results. In fact, research has shown that when women participate in negotiations for peace agreements, the agreements are much more likely to last. So I will end by using the words of Kofi Annan. There is no tool for development more effective than empowering of women. Thank you very much.
United Kingdom, Deputy Speaker, House of Lords.
Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Honourable Chairs and distinguished colleagues, it is a privilege to speak on this topic today, a topic in which we clearly, each of us, have a very personal stake. The importance of ensuring that development efforts don't reinforce existing disparities, but instead contribute to equitable and sustainable solutions. And may I say it is particularly gratifying to do this in a country which has made such strides in women's representation in Parliament, government, and indeed in the civil service. In South Africa in 2022, women accounted for 48.6% of senior civil service roles, a massive achievement that put the country in joint second place in the G20. And representation of women in South Africa's parliament is, I understand, at 43%, which is far beyond the global average and much better than the House of Lords, which I represent, which currently stands at just 30% of women. Although, as my colleague said, it is 40%. So we have made progress, but I think we all know there is work still to do. In 2018, a report was commissioned to mark the centenary of the act that allowed women in the UK to stand for Parliament. It found that barriers still remain: a male-dominated political culture, the difficulties of balancing political participation with family life, the financial impact, and ongoing gender-based violence, intimidation, and threat for those women who bravely put themselves forward. The IPU survey of parliamentarians found routine harassment of women, psychological, physical, online, and alarming rates of sexual violence, particularly to younger, unmarried, and women from minority backgrounds. So, of course, this makes the achievement of women parliamentarians, such as we have gathered here today, but our sisters too in parliaments around the world, it makes that achievement even more impressive. But it also points to the importance of idea sharing and collective action across all our parliaments to make change. Progress here is unacceptably slow. Women are increasingly visible in political life, but norms perpetuate in which people believe that Parliament is not a place for women, that they should not be involved. We can't allow this to continue. We heard repeatedly yesterday how representative parliaments and governments matter because they are more likely to take into consideration the interests of all the groups they represent. And this strengthens democracy. It empowers people of all backgrounds to achieve their potential. And crucially, as Professor Nanya so ably explained, gender equality and sustainable development are intimately connected. If you don't have one, you can't have the other. And we have a concrete example of this in the UK, when Rachel Reeves, our first ever female Chancellor, used her very first budget to implement 30 hours of paid childcare, a long overdue recognition of the economic contribution of women's unpaid domestic work. So that action will help women in the UK achieve their own career aspirations and achieve financial independence. But it will also push forward the UK's commitment to sustainable development targets related to women's unpaid domestic work. It's hard, however, to ignore the fact that we make this progress in a world that was built by men and for men. We know that gender differences are frequently still ignored in design decisions. Buildings are uncomfortably cold for women because they are designed for the core temperatures of men. Medical trials generally use male participants, so women are at risk of misdiagnosis. Even cars are designed around the body of reference man, so while men are more likely to crash, women are more likely to be hurt when they're involved in a collision. We heard yesterday how disaster planning is so often designed for male lives and not female lives. And it makes it very ironic that in disaster movies, when the Titanic goes down, we hear the cry, "Women and children first." Of course, in disaster planning, it isn't women and children first. We heard about this yesterday. And this pervasive bias in the fabric of our lives and in so many policies is a drag on progress, and it makes women's creativity, ingenuity, collaboration all the more important in driving change. According to the World Economic Forum, we heard earlier, it would take 131 years for the world to achieve gender parity. I'm sorry to say that most of us, in this case, won't be alive to see it happen, but we do have a role to play in speeding it up. We need to use our roles to ensure that government actions and decisions are seen through a gender lens and challenge where they are not. We've heard powerful arguments for gender mainstreaming and for gender budgeting, in closing gender gaps and exposing where gender inequalities will be worsened by allocation of resources. I've been greatly persuaded by the arguments around disaggregated data. I'm pleased that the UK's data action plan will aim to ensure that data is disaggregated and we can tell where the impact is on people of different ages, disabilities, sex, and even geography. Good data matters, and good data makes it intolerable to do nothing. But we have to start by using our roles to ensure that when policy options are considered, the specific impact on women and girls of all ages, all ethnicities, all socio-economic statuses are taken into account. Intersectionality matters. We need to make space and consider the impact on women who think, look, speak differently from the way we do, I do. And that diversity of experience and outlook is what makes this gathering so important and so interesting. And while female representation in Parliament is vital, we also need women in leading roles across the organisations, the bodies, the regulators and the authorities that will implement the laws that we pass, so that our aspirations at policy level are not diluted or ignored at the point of delivery. And finally, may I say, while it is such a privilege to discuss these issues with such an inspirational group of women leaders, it is crucial that men are part of the conversation. So I very much hope that we will keep gender on the agenda over the P20 discussions in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, we saved for our host, South Africa.
I thank you, Madam both Chair and your co-chair, Honourable Speaker of South Africa and her Deputy, our guests. In fact, we've got a speaker from Eastern Cape Legislature that is with us here. And all members from legislatures in South Africa, and I'm sure I am being, because I'm not, she's from my province.
You can't be biased. There are other speakers.
Yes, I'm told.
Provinces.
Yes. Honorable co-chairs, we were under the impression that we are going to ask questions. But let me briefly stand here. In fact, I was more inspired about what UK said in terms of how Parliament structure was developed. Loos were for men. Path outside, it was for men because men don't wear stilettes. And then our stilettes were messed up because it's paving. It may be things that are in the periphery, but are things that are a reflection that patriarchy, at that particular time, even now, it's still strong. But women that marched in 1956 paved a way. And in them paving their way, in them being part of the broader struggles, South Africa in 1994, its first speaker was a female. May her soul rest in peace, Honourable Frini Jinwala. We then, as South Africa, slowly but surely moved. And in us moving, well, the percentage of women in the executive has changed, has increased, same in Parliament. But now, even now as we speak, that things have changed in Parliament. We had, after Honourable Jinwala, we had quite a number of speakers that were female. But now, as we speak, we are led by a female, the speaker and her deputy. The House Chair for International is a female. It then reflects that as the country, with all the difficulties, we have moved. Outside the Parliament, where there are chapters we called Chapter 9 institutions. Those Chapter 9 institutions are led by females. In South Africa, we had the first Auditor General in the history of this country, who happens to be a young black female. We had a Chief Justice. Now, in the last year, the President appointed a Chief Justice, Maya, first in the history of this country to have a Chief Justice who is a female. We had a Public Protector who is a female, as we speak, a young female. So I'm illustrating this so that you see, and we're also going to learn, we see that we have made strides as South Africa, as much as we know patriarchy is an animal that is very difficult to kill. In terms of the executive, we are still struggling, and I think we are going to achieve that struggle of ensuring that we had a female president. We are going to achieve that struggle. It's not an easy struggle, you know. But in key executive positions that where issues of women at times are being either undermined or taken for granted, I will then just name few. One, justice is led by a female. Two, small business is led by a female. Three, employment and labor, where all laws that are governing workplaces where women at times are being undermined, they are not in the positions of authority in terms in the boardroom, is led by a female. And when the law, employment equity, was passed, there are other people that in the civil society that were not comfortable, even in parliament, that were taken to court. But the case was won because we understand that we are dealing with the most difficult struggle which every country and every woman is eager and interested to be part of, which is struggle for transformation. That is the most difficult struggle. And I would like to hear from other countries if they've achieved that. Having said that, our head of state, our Honorable, the President of South Africa, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa, launched in 2020 that all public procurement, 40% of public procurement is to be given to women. I will cite but a few: in agriculture, in correctional service, and in employment and labor. The only thing that when we came here, we would have loved to then say, where are we now? But those committees that are conducting an oversight over these departments are to ensure that that happened. My question, Chair, before I leave, is that can we as women, or the other department is social development, there is an enemy, I'm saying an enemy of poor women, because poverty and hunger is the face of a woman. And the little that they are getting for social relief, they use that for gambling. And gambling. And it's not that it was never raised in our country by one of our parties. And I think as we move on as countries, we would like to get an experience, because I think as the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, we are also concerned about that. Because our responsibility as the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, we are more of an activist structure, where we are to go out and listen to what women are saying and take all those to relevant department. But also women to come in and understand what are we doing as members of parliament, the laws that we passed, how are those laws impacting them in terms of women and girls. Unfortunately today, we have got 2 chairs, in fact 3 chairs, which are very critical in terms of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus view in some of our work. The one chair of fisheries, environment, We have been talking about climate change here. I think she has listened, and the one for agriculture. And we have got the chair, as it was said, of the Joint Committee in Finance, in ensuring that we have brought them so that they hear what has been raised here as women. Lastly, I do think that it is going to be very important in South Africa. We are dealing with that. We have got a very serious pandemic, which is gender-based violence and femicide. But now it is then, there's something back to that, is that women, and I think we need not be ashamed to say that, we must get some experiences from you. Women now that are in front of courts, either for killing their children, or selling their children, or abusing their children, introducing their children to drugs. And as women, we will then have to look into that. And as the Multi-Party Women Caucus of South Africa, we are determined that we will then have to speak with the Minister of Justice that, in fact, there must be justice to those children, but they are also to be empowered. We are to understand what is in the psyche of those people. But we do have men within the thing of sexual harassment and GBV, structures of men who are saying, not in our name. And that gives us a level of comfort, because it means that we have got men that respect women. And in all what we have said here, the bigger elephant in the room, when I am to stand up, I'm throwing the cat within the pigeons, parenting. Because everything, in terms of gender-based violence and sexual harassment, charity begins at home. The first school of all of us here was our homes. What has happened? What has happened at the time that we are parents, that the world, our children, both boys and girls, because we are to balance that so that we build a future in this struggling environment of transformation. We build a future of our children knowing that the only thing that we differ from one another is our anatomical our anatomical structure. Otherwise, we are human beings. When you cut here, the blood that comes out is not saying, I'm a blood of a female or I'm a blood of a man. It's blood of a human being. And therefore, as South Africa, we think that as the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, we're still going to go to our speaker to put this. I think the Speaker of Swaziland is going to be here tomorrow, because we were really inspired, myself and my deputy, Honorable James, when women in Swaziland said they are discussing the matter of parenting. And that's very important. So we thought South Africa will then put that in this, so that we don't talk high level. We only, also women that are watching us in South Africa, in those corners, rural areas, peri-urban areas, they can hear that, in fact, some, if not all, of issues that are affecting them in these gatherings are being addressed, and they have got a future. Honorable Ndlovu said, the time, Speaker, for talking, it's over. Now, as women, we must stand up and march. And what we are going to be marching for is for transformation. Transformation not only in South Africa, but globally. That is what we are determined we will do as South Africa through the Multi-Party Women's Caucus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable members. Thank you very much, Honorable Tunjwa. I will now call Professor Polamula, who is going to reflect on the statements that were made by various countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond, and thank you to those honourable members who told us a little bit about what's happening in their country. And it is gratifying to see that there are many gains that are being made, and I think in particular the United Kingdom has many lessons for us that we can benefit from. Of course, South Africa is also a relatively good case study, and we have a very strong caucus, as we've just heard now, Women's Caucus in Parliament. But maybe just a couple of things to mention despite the progress and the fact that we need to remain on that path of progress is when W20 South Africa took over from Brazil, and we were very fortunate to have had 3 countries of the global south before us: Indonesia, India, and Brazil. And so there was a common message that was coming through that was very global south centered. And so we were quite sure that we were going to continue on this trajectory and that we will just work as we had. But that was not to be, because of the fact that we started feeling a backlash at the beginning of this year. And those concepts, those ideas, those policy recommendations that we presented in the past are not readily acceptable now. So it is a feeling, it's a slight feeling of, I wouldn't say dread, but I guess one doesn't know how to put it. You know, as a gender activist, one looks at one's life and you say, okay, we've achieved so much, only to find that things can be undone very quickly. And we should not allow that. So what I think has been important with South Africa's presidency is that we had chosen our themes of solidarity, equality, and sustainability, and we have stuck by those themes. And as the engagement group of W20, we have also remained faithful to the identity of South Africa as a country with a constitution that embraces human rights within a multilateral context. South Africa is well known for its work within multilateral contexts. So as we move, I think it's important to keep in mind the contexts, the new contexts perhaps, that we are facing now and the uncertainty of what will happen in 2026. So that's not on a very good note, but I thought maybe I should mention that. The other is that I had forgotten to mention in my presentation was the importance of intersectionality when we're looking at issues of women and girls. So it was mentioned by one of our speakers from the UK that we need to disaggregate data in many different ways. And of course, there's an important intersection between gender, race, and class. So those are issues and intersections that should also inform the way in which we take our policy direction in order to protect the most vulnerable and marginalized in our societies. I think the way forward, considering our context and considering the fact that we do care about the vulnerable and the marginalized, made me think about a statement that was made by our first democratic president, Nelson Mandela, just before he died. And President Mandela was someone who really believed in friendship, in working together, and for South Africa to be a beacon of hope to the world based on the human rights culture and the culture of democracy that we had embraced in 1994. And so he was also a proponent of Ubuntu. And I'm just going to read a quote by President Mandela. "The spirit of Ubuntu, that profound African sense that we are only human through the humanities of other human beings, is not a parochial phenomenon, but has added globally to our common search for a better world." And I think that's what we should keep in mind. That's what you should keep in mind in your powerful positions as parliamentarians, is the building of a better world for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I will now call Honorable Speaker Ms. Togo Titiza, the Speaker of the National Assembly, for her inputs.
Program directors, thank you very much. I would like to recognize all the speakers who are here and deputy speakers from the G20 member countries and SADC who are also here. My deputy speaker, I would like to start by inviting, as I call, the speakers of the 9 provinces of South Africa, who are here, and most of them women. The Speaker of the Gauteng Legislature, the Speaker of the Eastern Cape, the Speaker of KwaZulu-Natal, the Speaker of the Northwest Province, or the representative, she may not be here, the Speaker of Mpumalanga Province, the Speaker of Limpopo. All of these speakers that I'm calling of our provinces, we've got 9 provincial legislatures. All of them are women. Free State is a man, but maybe a deputy speaker is a woman. Deputy Speaker of the Free State. Western Cape is a man. He was in the youth section. I just thought it was important for our guests and colleagues to know that in our provincial legislatures, we've got the majority who are women. In the national parliament, we've got a bicameral system. So the Speaker of the National Assembly is a woman. The chairperson of the National Council of Provinces is a woman. She was in the PAP speakers meeting, Pan-African Parliament speakers meeting. She will be joining us shortly. And our Deputy Speaker, who have opened our session and has been working with you yesterday, is also a woman. The chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Financial Management of Parliament is a woman. I would like to raise her. She was your speaker who recapped yesterday, Honorable Ndlovu. We also have got women chairpersons of portfolio committees. Some of them who are here, Honorable Dinah Pule. She's the portfolio committee chair in the National Assembly of Agriculture. Honorable Gancho, she's the chairperson of the portfolio on environment. Honorable Tunjwa is the chair of the multi-party caucus for women. Honorable Lizelle van der Merwe is the portfolio committee on women. We also have got the steering committee members of the women. Mamu Tunjwa, have you stopped being the... So these are the members of the multi-party women's caucus who are here today with us. You can take your seat. I did this deliberately because most of the time, unless I have here, one thing I forgot, the co-chair, hello? Oh, NCOP Select Committee chairpersons. Manyaniswas. Thank you very much. We also have got a progressive gender activist who's our co-chair on the Joint Standing Committee on Finance, Honorable Likhanyane Soviet. Yesterday, he deliberately decided he's not going to attend the youth session. He will be in this women's conference. Not because of cosmetics, but because he's one of our activists on gender equality. So it was more deliberate and intentional. But I would like to welcome all our delegates who are here, coming outside of South Africa, for your participation in this conference and giving us your ideas and sharing experiences of what you have done. I've requested the co-chairs, because we still have time, that maybe we'll also open up the discussion to allow a number of people to make their interventions, because this is an important topic. One of the issues which, as I listened both to the presenter as well as the responses from the different countries and sharing their experiences on how they have broken somewhat the glass ceiling, because these were the things that were maybe not thought that in our lifetime it would have happened. But one of the issues that I do think we need to deliberate on, what happens when we advance and then we regress? Is it a matter of legislation? Is there something else that we might need to do to ensure that the journey that women had started in terms of transforming our society continues? We've heard from Namibia the story she shared with us, that when they started, it was 50% women representation in parliament. But today, that number has dropped. South Africa would say the same, that we had actually advanced and we have gone back. And I'm sure a number of countries have had their experiences. The question maybe that we need to ask ourselves, what is it in the political system, despite policies, despite legislation, that still creates this difficulty where we find ourselves moving 2 steps backward? Is it in the culture? Maybe where we may not be able to intervene? Is it in the terms of office that creates such a problem, where some of women who are professionals, as much as they may be capable, but they would actually think long-term and say, I've got a younger family, I cannot leave my profession and come to serve for 5 years, not being sure whether I'm able to continue, or 4 years, depending on the terms of offices of different legislatures. If that is the case, what is it that we need to do to change? Is it the conditions of service in the political system that make younger women in particular to find it not exciting to come into the legislatures? Is it in the architect of our spaces that actually are unfriendly, such that those who are still at the childbearing age will think twice about going to parliament because they feel, where am I going to breastfeed? This space does not accommodate me. Where am I going to leave my toddler? Because there is no early childhood development in the precinct. And therefore, the vulnerabilities, when you weigh, they become more than others. We've had women who have been standing in constituencies, maybe in our situation where it's, in terms of the party system, it's representation by party in parliament, but at local government, we've got a 2-tier system where you've got constituency-based at a ward level and proportional representation. But you've got in other jurisdiction of our member states of the G20 who are here, who will say we've got a constituency-based system like in the UK. One of the things that were found as a challenge, experienced by women who come from the constituency-based system and in our situation in the local government, is lack of finances in campaigning funds and other materials. Where a party is not able to support, that woman who stands in a constituency must fend for herself. From your public relations to paraphernalia for elections to everything else that would require the voters to go out and vote. Is that the challenge? Is it the harassment that women face when they have to stand for office? Because our cultural dynamics might still be saying the woman's role is in the kitchen. Is that the dilemma? Because for me, I think you would go a cycle and you've got a good story where all of us are on the ascent. But the next time when we meet, you see the regression. Where is the problem? We're talking about inclusivity in the economy of women. But what are those non-written criteria that are used to exclude women. Because in some instances, it's not because there is no law that your corporates may read and understand, but there will be nuances that will make sure that women don't have an edge in the corporate world. So when you assess the public sector, even though not there yet in terms of 50% and above, there has been a sizable increase in women participation. But when you come at the corporate level, the numbers don't match. So what are those nuances that we need to deal with in order to make sure that, gender equality becomes a reality across the various sectors of our lives? There are issues that sometimes we don't talk about when it comes to the exit in the legislatures. I've always found that when women parliamentarians leave office, very few of them will be in the boards, as boards of directors of companies, whatever. Most of them actually disappear in the system. But men gets captured very easily by the different corporates. So what is it that as legislatures led by women, more women in the various portfolios and women caucuses need to do to make sure that we do not lose these women in the political systems of our countries when they leave office due to the term of office that are shortened? I'm sure a majority of us who have even forgotten who might have been other women members of parliament who had been in our legislatures. Maybe also within parliament, how do we create a space of making sure that those women who have exited office becomes a resource in the work of the legislatures to empower other women to be able to make a difference continuously. And lastly, one of the themes of the conference is about how do we build parliamentary diplomacy in dealing with issues of gender, in dealing with issues of solidarity, in dealing with issues of climate change. Having listened to one another, how do we make sure that we create, maybe not loosely, but partnerships to make sure that we can learn from one another? You know, in Parliament, we've got this thing called friendship committees. Should we not start friendship committees of women caucuses so that we can have a structured arrangement of learning from one another in terms of the issues that we are grappling with to advance gender equality? It's a thought. Maybe somebody might have a better view. But I felt, Chairperson, I'll just reflect on some of these matters for our reflections and for our thoughts, because it is worrying that one day we make progress, the next day we do not. I mean, it becomes very easy. Those who are speakers and deputy speakers would know. You arrive in the beginning of the term, you've got good representation of women across parties. And as party reviews their list, you start to see more men coming in. When a woman either passes away or maybe resign in parliament, very rare that you'll find the parties representing that woman by another woman. In most instances, it will be a woman and then a man. And these may look very minuscule in terms of what the impact of this is. But the truth is, that's where those challenges emerge. welcome Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Refilwe. That is the chairperson of our National Council of Provinces, whom I said she's on the way. She was from PAP. So she's just joined us. Thank you very much, co-chairs, for giving me an opportunity to express one or two views.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. We serve in the same house with the Honorable Speaker, and she is the one that normally calls us to come to the podium. And today feels slightly different. Thank you very much. I think we have all heard Honorable Dunjwa when she took to the podium, indicating that she thought we were going to give you an opportunity to ask you questions. At the time, we only had a space to allow statements. Luckily, we are ahead of time. We thought after the speaker advised us that maybe we can take some questions from the floor. They may be directed to the professor, but I've also observed or listened to the contributions that were made from various countries. We had countries that were sharing their successes. Maybe if you have a question you'd like to ask from a speaker from another country, you're allowed to do that. And I also observed that we have countries that we share similar challenges, from your gender-based violence to the issue of sanitary dignity packs, though I have not heard anyone talking about teenage pregnancy is one of the scourges that we are faced with within our country, as well as statutory rape. So I am hoping that during the engagement, these issues are going to come up so that we ensure we find a way of advising or sharing ideas. What I'm now going to do, I'm going to take 3 questions at a time. The lunch is at 12. I'm going to take 3 questions at a time. You'll indicate who your question is directed to. Then we're going to allow the next person to answer and then take the next round until we get on to lunchtime. If you have any question, can you please indicate by raising your hand? Okay, I'm going to start from this row. Honorable on my right, you're going to be the first one, Honorable Member, and followed by Honorable there on my right, number 2. I'm going to close with you, Honorable Member, there, you're going to be number 3, and then I'm going to take the next round. Honorable Member, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Mine is not a question. It's when the speaker was on the podium and discussing why we start something and in the ultimate end, after a certain period, whatever we have started, it cannot be, in actual fact, no one can even refer back to the same issue. And I definitely would agree with her to say this election period, the election periods that exist in the world, because there's always the 5-year term and whatever the terms that are, includes leadership that are elected for a certain period. Immediately at the end of that period, it's very rare where you will find the very same leadership that were busy with very important aspects coming back to Parliament to continue. As a result, we have a lack of sustainability in matters that are very important that need to be continued as it may be. But the other thing, there's something that we don't talk about as women in leadership, women who do not support one another. Secondly, women who are suffering from pull-down syndrome, to say it cannot be this woman who is occupying this position. It has to be me, irrespective of whether you have the expertise, you have the educational background, and so it's all about a political game. To say if it's not me, then it must be the other person, and I think it happens everywhere. we would like to be leaders, but we don't consider the requirements of being a leader. And lastly, what I want to say is there's always, we have different political parties represented in a government. So there will always be those that have the most ideas that they can contribute to, but they don't belong to the group of those political parties that are in power of the financial resources. As a result, the unfair or biased distribution of the funding, say for an example, if we are talking about the gender responsive funding, it will always be concentrated on a particular group and excluding the other particular group, even though they are women and so on. And telling the honest fact, we are talking about the rural areas. We are talking about different sectors of the society. But it's not everybody who will be reached to become part and parcel of what the most important discussion point would be. Yes, we can say we go to rural areas, but where? There are those, a majority or a higher percentage that can find themselves being left out in the whole process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tembewayo. Over to you, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Jane Sibulezi Mananiso from the NCOP, Select Committee Chair of Security and Justice. One would want to start with what you have indicated as a problem in South Africa, just to emphasize that we do have programs that speaks to combating or dealing with teenage pregnancy. So I think what we would want to get as perhaps knowledge from other countries is how are they dealing with it if it's a problem in their countries. Because in South Africa, as I'm saying, that we have different programs that seeks to deal with that issue. The challenge always becomes those who are in the rurals who are not actually adhering to programs or awarenesses that we are conducting as government with regards to teenage pregnancy. So I always say to people, more especially as a country in South Africa, we have 12 languages. And if we don't package our messages with all those 12 languages, we seek to leave other people behind. So I want to check with yourselves in terms of your countries. How do you make sure that anything that you do as government reach those who are even using other indigenous languages? Perhaps if you can share that one as the country, we would be able to draw strength from that, because I know that in terms of our awarenesses and communicating with the society, we lack in terms of packaging all our messages with all those 12 different languages. And then my other question is with regards to United Kingdom. I want to check with regards to what you said on the price equality, that you would have a contractor and the person who is permanent getting the same wage. How did you do it that you get to that particular point? Because it's what is good in terms of economic emancipation for women or those who are vulnerable. So if you can share how you managed to do that part, I think as South Africa, we would be able to draw lessons from that, because we do have programs that seeks to address issues of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. Programs like yours, for us, it's community workers project, where people would get stipend 3.5, but perhaps if we can get what we are doing in terms of ensuring that those programs we get to a certain scale, we would be able to quantify what we are doing as South Africa. And it's something that one would want to applaud you. But lastly, Honorable Member, what has been said by our Prof in terms of time-bound equity targeting, I think it's something that one is drawing knowledge from, with regards to the fact that we, as women here, we know
every time we are advocating for our issues and as well lobbying in all the platforms that we are, but we never get to understanding the content and context with regards to how do you measure, noting the time bound and the targets that have been made as KPIs. So it's something that one is very appreciating, that at least we need to enhance and strengthen that particular part as South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mananiso. I'll hand over now. I think the Honorable Member was introduced as a speaker from Mpumalanga. Please introduce yourself and then get straight to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm not a speaker, I'm a member of legislature. I'm representing the Office of the Speaker. My name is Nkate Gondlovu. Thank you, Chair. Now I just want to first answer on the issue, Deputy Speaker, to say why women tend to not make it after Parliament. My observation in many occasions is that many women leave Parliament emotionally and physically exhausted from sexism and intimidation or harassment in Parliament. And some choose not to return or even to participate after the term has ended. So most of our women are not protected, particularly those who rise to political positions in Parliament. They tend to be affected by those three factors. So also on them, I forgot the latter speaker who spoke of patriarchy. I also strongly believe patriarchy is one of our root problems. It's an animal that still exists in our culture. You can take example what happens with just here, Turkey. Turkey has sent an apology to say our women is sick, and then later send a male representative. To me, sitting where I'm sitting, I see it as patriarchy, because we cannot stand here and say Turkey had only one woman sent here, and then why do we have one woman sent here out of the entire cabinet in Turkey? So patriarchy, it's not just a South African problem. It's an international problem in most parliaments, which needs to be addressed. And I strongly feel that policies should be written to say whatever percentage of women should be recognized in positions, strategic positions for women to participate, with or without the approval of men. It must be a binding factor so that we can do away with patriarchy. And then also lastly, another thing that it's affecting most of our women after domestic violences and child, it's because our women, when it comes to land ownership, in most of our rural communities, particularly here in South Africa, we are still having situations, particularly in where the chiefs and indunas are having authority over land. They cannot distribute land. If you are a woman, you need to have a man. So take to look into agricultural factors. So if there's a woman who has a capacity to stand to say, I want to take a route to agriculture, the woman will be limited automatically because of the land issue. So we need to revisit that and check how do we empower our women to secure land, and also that whether it's domestic problems or business problem, they can always have capacity to stand, because the land ownership will give the woman a strong foundation to start over. Whether you want to start as an agricultural person, or want to start a new family after being violated or abused by the husband, or after feeling exhausted from serving Parliament. When you have your own land, you can start over. So those are the small things Parliament can use to re-empower our women, so that we don't find ourselves in situations that we are stuck with women living with their abusive husband, because, oh well, where will I go from here? But when I have a small land, I can take it from there. So those are my suggestions on the issues raised by the speaker, to say, what is it that is limiting our women to survive after maybe violation, or after saving powerful positions in Parliament or in business sectors? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ndlovu. I'd like to take this moment and acknowledge Honorable Maqubele from the Eastern Cape. She's a chairperson of Multi-Party Women's Caucus. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I would also like to acknowledge Honorable Mbombo from the Western Cape. She's a chairperson of Multi-Party Women's Caucus. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I saw a few people that had their hands up. I'm going to request if there's someone that would like to, I don't see this honorable speaker, if there's any member that would like to make a comment on what Honorable Tembekwayo has said. If you can, please just keep it within 2 minutes. Can you please just turn on timer for me or for us? Thank you so much. Is there a member, Honorable Tunjwa? Over to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, and I'm standing. Sorry, we are used of standing. Yes. Mine is more on, when I was raising my hand, I was going to speak on a very important matter. That as countries we must learn to one another. An issue in terms of what Honorable Tembekwayo raised and what the speaker raised, the matter of mental health, that is affecting women. And mental health doesn't have any color, doesn't have any political affiliation, doesn't have any age, that whether any class, and it's important that we look into that and we exchange, maybe when, I don't know when we're going to have time, exchange experiences. Fortunately, Dr. Mbobo is here. We do have health workers, professionals that are here. We must be told, because that is what is at a point is affecting women. That's what I was to raise when my hand was up, and yeah.
Can you
Chair.
please wrap up, Honorable Chair?
I'm done, Chair.
Oh, thank you. There was a question also from Honorable Mananiso regarding issues of teenage pregnancy and people in the rural areas that are still left behind, and also mentioned that we have 12 official languages in the country, and she feels like there's a group that we don't reach out to. The 12th official language is sign language that was enacted by President Ramaphosa in 2023. We also feel like as a country, much has not been done in ensuring that that community, when they access various offices, they find people that will communicate with them in their language that they understand. Maybe if there's issues in your country in that regard that you have dealt with, we'll appreciate it if you can share those ideas. And she mentioned price equality as well, on how they did it on contractors and formal employers. That question was directed to the UK. And the last one was to the professor with regard to the time-bound equity target. I'm going to give you, honorable members, at least 2 minutes each. Thank you very much. You can raise your hands. Over to you, ma'am.
The same pay, same job legislation is Australian legislation. So the trade unions came to the government and said that whilst there were strong workplace laws in place, when they negotiated an agreement with the employer, with their direct employees, the employer would then go out and use a contractor to undercut. So the agreement would be, say, let's say a plumber working for a company was getting $40 an hour. The employer could then use the award system to pay the plumber $30 an hour to do the same work. So we had workers working in a company doing the same work but getting different pays because of the nature of the industrial relations system, where the employer could use a different agreement for the plumber who was employed by ABC Plumbing as opposed to the plumber that was directly employed. So last year we put in place legislation that guarantees no matter where you're working, if you are a plumber working for company A and you're working for a contractor or you're directly employed, you must be paid the same rate of pay that applies to that employer. The opposition and employers said the sky would fall in. It hasn't. The legislation's been in place for a year. It's really changed people's lives in a very positive way, and people have had, particularly in the mining industry, but in the airline industry and other really competitive industries, people have had between a 20 and 30% increase in their base rate of pay. So it's a significant achievement and something I'm really proud of as a former trade union official.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Do we have another member that would like to address Honourable Mananiso? Over to you, ma'am. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I'll speak very briefly, but as you mentioned, the UK. So the Equal Pay Act was passed in the 1970, but it became the Equality Act 2010. So it's linked into the other equalities, and the key principle within the Act is that the same pay for work of equal value. So that is the principle, that anybody doing a job of equal value must get the same pay, whether they're men or women. It can lead to questions of how you assess whether a job is of equal value. Of course, there are always loopholes and way around this. The other thing the Act requires is that any organisation employing more than 250 people must publish their gender pay gap. So that's where we get the data on the gender pay gap in the UK, which is going down, but it remains, I think it is now at 7%. The global average, the UN says, is 20%, so, you know, we're doing well. One of the explanations behind the gap is that more women are in part-time work, and the hourly rate for part-time workers tends to be lower than the hourly rate for full-time workers. But that's some of what we're doing in the UK.
Thank you very much. Do we have another honourable member that would like to answer her question? Maybe the first one on teenage pregnancy. Do we have somebody that would like to address that? Over to you, honourable member. Thank you.
Muito obrigada. Eu vou falar em português. Em relação a essa questão,
in Portuguese, as for that, we have a problem of precocious relationships and marriages, and we, in coordination with the civil society, we have promulgated a law that fights those types of marriages. And as per that law, anyone can denounce a situation of a precocious relationship. A neighbor or a member of the community can denounce a father or a brother or a relative that finds those relationships, and the person that hides that is also punished by law. That didn't happen before. What we are facing now, when we evaluated that law, is that our communities are not literate, and we have also the situation of various national languages, and we are trying to find partners to produce and publish parts of the law that they can take to the communities in their own language, so that the communities can understand what's going on, when am I going to be punished, why is it a crime that I take my daughter and give her to a man. So we have obtained this victory with the civil society, but we are still trying to win this battle, to take this law to the communities in their own language. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I'm now going to move to the comment that was made by Honourable Nkateko Ndlovu. Do we have an Honourable Member that would like to respond to that comment? She made a few comments
on why women are not coming back to parliament, why do they lose interest, patriarchy, the issue of Turkey, and a few others. Do we have, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Chair of the session. I am Nontembeko Boyce, the Speaker of KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Legislature. I will not be directly answering because I also linked it with what was raised by the Speaker of the National Assembly and in areas that relate to the retention in general of women. I think the other aspect that we need to do is continuing to have intergenerational engagement and workshops amongst us as women when we are in offices, especially accountability from us who are already elected by being monitored by the rest of them through inclusion of young women and retention of women. Also in that, I heard the speaker speaking about us having platforms of empowerment so that as women, we also understand what is obtaining in the different countries, especially the issue of culture. In some, I have learned over time that in some countries you find that, including in a province that I come from, because of culture, strong culture, you may find that even women, when they are given opportunities, they may not be able to effect them as they were expected because they would still have the other side that they need to attend to post-work, which is culture. I am saying this because I'm coming from a predominantly Zulu province where there is strong issues of culture and also issues of respect. When you find that the commitments would not exclude you because you are in leadership, when culture calls, you would be called to do some things that you will not be effecting what you were elected to do. But if we understand each other and we build that network, I believe it can be easier for us to understand and be able to make women in those other countries and provinces like mine to be able to rise up to what is expected of them through the network of sisterhood, so to say, that goes beyond the boundaries, but also makes us understand the different cultures and what role they play in the development of women and the sustainability of women in leadership, especially the younger women, because also those that are going to enter into childbearing stage, you find that they may not be able to consistently be there. They are starting families, and the environment in parliaments may not be allowing them to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Boyce, for those contributions. Honorable members, I did see some of you raised hands. I think we're a few minutes away now from 12 o'clock. It's time for our lunch. Thank you very much to each and every speaker that spoke here today. Honorable members, it is evident that we have a lot to learn from each other so that we can find lasting solutions to the challenges that are being faced by women and children in our various countries. Let us use the remaining hours or days to make sure that we engage, we network, and ensure that we communicate also post this summit, because the summit may end, but our challenges remain, and we owe it to ourselves to work together in finding the solutions to the challenges that are facing our women and children. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to my honorable co-chair to close this session for us.
For those words, we are at the end of our section, and it was a very productive one, we have to say. I have some small words also to try to wrap up the discussion that we had here this morning. More than ever, gender equality or gender-sensitive programs are a fundamental pillar for creating inclusive, thriving societies and organizations. Gender policies are central to shaping this progress, providing the framework needed to ensure that everyone, regardless of gender, has equal opportunities and rights. But what exactly makes a gender policy more effective? And after all these morning discussions, it's getting even bigger and bigger, the confusion. How can those policies drive change? It cannot be the prompt wish of promoting women solely, regardless of their competence and knowledge. As we also can testimony, it's happening all over. It has to be the commitment to ensuring equal treatment and opportunities for individuals of all genders, with a focus on eliminating discrimination and fostering an inclusive environment. A gender policy is not just about ensuring women's rights, but aims to create an environment where everyone, irrespective of their gender, feels respected, valued, and included. A well-crafted gender policy actively works to level the playing field, ensuring that recruitment, promotions, opportunities, participations in decision-making processes, and leadership roles are based on merit rather than solely on gender. Gender-sensitive planning interventions are deliberate strategies that acknowledges and addresses the different needs, experiences, and priorities of everybody, especially women, girls, and marginalized groups in planning and development processes. Let me, and all this during this morning we have talked about this a lot, but let me say some examples. We here are from different countries and backgrounds, but in many regions in the world, including in my country, boys are still preferred children to be sent to school in households, especially if parents have to choose between fewer resource allocations. In many regions, girls can spend between 5 to 7 days in a month without going to school because they cannot afford properly present themselves in public during their menstrual period. In many regions, women just avoid maternity altogether because laws don't prevent employers to fire them in case they become pregnant, let alone risky pregnancies. The contrary is also true. In many regions, women are still not able to mindfully plan for their pregnancies because they cannot do it without the husband's consent. All these examples leave women prone to less access to better jobs, finance, credit, investment facilities, and the list goes on. In my country, microcredit experiences have proven that women are more reliable and financially responsible. However, they are less exposed, and it's more difficult to them to access financing and credit facilities. And this morning we have learned that not just financing, but the land rights and so on. Those are all examples remembering us that as legislators, we must think inclusion. We must shape our legislation and consequently our policies in a manner that does not just promote women, but creates a fair environment to allow all genders to equally thrive. A final word as citizens and mothers. How are our education systems shaped to respect, accept, consider empowerment of our girls? May we always remember, as we have said yesterday and today, a better and fair world might start within ourselves. The way we are educating our children, how we make them understand that our own development will never be sustainable and plain if someone somewhere in the neighborhood, and neighborhood it's the whole world, is still deprived from the basic to survive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Trosso. Honorable members, it is lunchtime now until 1 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock, can you please come back so that we can proceed with the next session? Thank you very much.